Hey there, everybody. This is Pete Erickson with Modev. I hope you're having a great day. This is part of our Get to Know Our Speaker series. And my next guest is somebody who I've had the pleasure of knowing for the last 7 years. He started following this little known space of voice technology under a new company he formed back then called Voicebot.ai. And I watched Bret cover that space so closely, and he was really the first one to do it. And so it's no wonder as this space has evolved and emerged now with the introduction of large language models and ChatGPT, and now everybody else jumping in, he formed another group called Synthedia, and he's been covering the generative AI space and large language model space incredibly closely. You will find his daily newsletter, his LinkedIn post, and just his thoughts on the space, super insightful. And we were very, very fortunate to have Bret involved with this year's event. And he's actually going to be kicking it off for us on the morning of September 6th with his thoughts on what's happening in the space. And to tease on that, I'm going to bring him onto the stage here, and we're going to chat about this market and this industry and what is happening. So welcome to the stage, Mr. Bret Kinsella. Bret, welcome. How are you doing?
Pete Erickson, my pleasure to be here. Always a pleasure to talk to you. I'm looking forward to seeing you in just about a week.
Yeah, it's going to be really nice. To tell you, I think what's interesting about this year is a lot of familiar faces and people I consider my friends, but a lot of new faces as well. Because let's face it, this industry has changed a lot in the last year, and we're right in the midst of that change. And as we go through that change, it seems that there are a lot of very hot topics. And I was really excited that we were able to connect and do a quick recording, because I've got some questions for you, and I'd love to pick your brain. You just posted on this fact that is ChatGPT, is it doomed? And along with it, this very exciting space. And there seems to be some people out there calling for the demise, but I think you rightly pointed out that maybe it's a little too early for that. But welcome to the stage, and would love your hot take on like what's happening right now.
Thanks, Pete. I'm looking forward to seeing you and everybody else. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to recently that are excited about coming to DC for the show. And so few people have been able to connect recently. I was just at an event in London, and we need people to get together. Like, this is great, and we get to talk to each other, but like these large groups of people, it's like so much more sharing, so much more insight and learning. I love it. So yeah, ChatGPT, it's not going anywhere. I think, when I look at this, I've been through a number of technology shifts. I've been doing this since the early days of the web. I've been doing very similar things during that period of time. And I always look at the adoption data. That's the thing that I've learned. It's like, what's happening from an adoption standpoint? And in this space, it's not just that it was really popular and moved very quickly for adoption of ChatGPT. It actually has just accelerated. And it's just accelerated in different ways that people can't see. And so the common arguments against ChatGPT being just a fad, first of all, there was a lot of hype. So that's the first thing you need to have. And so that was true. But then the second thing is, okay, well, wait a second. Website visits have gone down. Oh, people must not like ChatGPT anymore. They're not accessing it. Well, of course, that website decline, I think, in part is natural. Like you would expect, like after a frenzy, it would go down. But I'm not even sure it did go down, because the data points that they bring out are exactly at the same time that the iOS mobile app launched. And then, you see another decline when the Android app, and the iOS mobile app has over 10 million downloads. The Android app had 5 million in less than a week. And so those people are not going to the website anymore because they're using the mobile app. In fact, like I think more than half of their usage is on mobile today. So that's just one thing. But the other thing is, Andreessen Horowitz had this great thing that just came out, and they talk about willingness to pay. And that's one of the things I look at. When we were in the voice and AI space around voice assistants and Amazon and Google, people were willing to pay for devices, but they didn't show an indication they wanted to pay for services.
Right.
In this space, in the generative AI space, these LLM-backed chatbots, people are paying right from the beginning. I mean, ChatGPT is free, right?
Yeah. And well, I pay $20 a month. So
yeah, but it's, and you are, and here's the whole thing. Like Andreessen Horowitz came out with this, and there's a few other data points. So first of all, Yipit Data came out a month ago, said there's 1.5 million ChatGPT plus subs. Okay, that's $360 million in annual revenue right there. Okay.
Right.
Andreessen Horowitz thinks there are 2 million subs at this point.
Right.
That's about 500 million, $500 million
Right.
in revenue from ChatGPT. And Brad Gerstner in the All In podcast just sort of offhandedly said, I actually think there's 4 million.
Right.
That's $1 billion business right there.
Right.
Now, I've seen
Right.
other things that say that it's like $700,000 a day to run ChatGPT. Is that more or less than it was? I
Right.
don't know, but that right there is only about $250 million. So looks like a cash flow positive business already. We're not even talking about the explosion in the use of GPT 3.5 for
Right.
business applications, right? 4,500 companies already using Azure OpenAI services. And we're just talking about OpenAI. There's all
Yeah.
these other companies out there. You and I have talked about Meta a lot with Llama
Yeah.
2. You know, in the open source space, there are people who are using Google Palm. It's not as many.
Mhm.
Bedrock, Amazon Bedrock just announced a bunch of new clients using that. And so, yeah, the imminent death of ChatGPT and generative AI
Right.
seems to be
Right.
overstated if I just look at a few basic facts. And even with that, everybody talks about 100 million people in 6 to 8
Yeah.
weeks for
Yeah.
ChatGPT. The last number I said was that I saw was 230 million monthly active
Right.
users on the site.
Right.
So
Right.
I don't think interest has waned. I think it's people are incorporating into their
Yeah.
businesses and their daily life in a little different
Yeah.
ways than maybe they were before.
Well, no, great summary, Brad. I think you're spot on. I think that you look, if we remember back, the iPhone was also thought to be dead at some points, along the journey after it got released.
The CEO of BlackBerry held it up and he's like, "Oh,
Right.
it's a toy. There's no keyboard. Business users
Steve
can't play
Ballmer. Steve Ballmer laughed about it. Didn't have a keyboard. There's no way this thing could be successful, right? So I think that this is a very new technology, but we've also just seen. I mean, you and I have been following this, the conversational AI space very closely, and really the natural language industry, and I don't think I've seen as big of a shift in a market dynamic in the last year than at any point previously. Maybe with the exception of obviously the arrival of the internet, but that took 5 or 6 years even to sort of start to catch on. And it wasn't until, the dot-com boom in 98, 99 that really happened. But there have been, I'd say that the arrival of the smartphone and the smartphone era was a big shift. But that was even a channel change. There was a new channel to reach people, right? This is a change in how things are built. So along those lines, we have this new race for supremacy in large language models, right? And, some talk about how one of the challenges with large language models is people don't really know what's happening inside of them. And some, anecdotal things about is GPT-4 getting smarter or dumber? Is that inherently one of the challenges with large language models? Let's talk a little bit about that. Kind of what's your take and what you're seeing in the, in the LLM space.
Oh man, there's a lot of questions baked in there. So just so many layers. So first of all,
I'd like to hit you with a lot of questions, Brett, because you can answer them.
Well, I don't know. So the first thing is not being able to see what goes on inside is somewhat problematic. So observability is going to be a much bigger topic over the next 6 or 8 months than it has been up to this point, because when it was a POC, we could get away with just looking at the outputs and the inputs and like divining some value from that. But when you start moving these into production systems, which a lot of large corporations are working on right now, they want to have just a little bit more control, and a little bit more control often is going to come from a little bit more visibility. So observability and what's happening is going to be important. And the thing to look for is, you think about forecasting where this is headed, is you think it's going to lead to a lot more testing and monitoring of the models than we've seen in the past. And we have a lot of evidence that this is actually something that people are thinking about. Weights and biases, Snorkel AI, Hugging Face have all made big splashes recently. 2 of those 3 have just raised significant sums at very large valuations, because you can see the very quick ramp when you move from the mere capability, the large language model plus the application infrastructure on top of it, to production. Tooling becomes super important. So that's like a key theme that we have to move forward. In terms of the large language models and their performance over time, Um, there was a study that came out not too long ago that says, GPT-4 is getting dumber. But if you look at the actual report, there's a couple things that might suggest that's not true. And I think what we've seen time and time again is that researchers' assumptions drive their test protocol, and their test protocol sometimes determines what the result is. And so there's the repeatability using slightly different approaches is not very high. So GPT-4, is it getting dumber? It's possible that it's getting dumber because these are learning systems, and the more people that use it and the more feedback it gets from those users and the behavior, it could actually take it off course. And we've seen this in the past with less sophisticated AI tools. But I think it's unlikely. For example, one of the things in that recent study at Berkeley was that it was answering fewer questions than in the past. Well, the key reason for that was it wasn't answering questions that were considered problematic anymore, which is not a bug from OpenAI's standpoint. It's a feature because what they've done is they've enhanced the guardrails. So things it was answering before were things it didn't want to answer. And so that was one of the things that brought it down. The other thing they talked about was math. It wasn't as good. But if you look at it too, like these systems aren't designed to do math. And it's basically, I look at a lot of these things like a coin flip. So they tested it one time, it looks bad. They tested another time, it looks good. Test it 10 more times. Let's see what see what it looks like. And so the systems are actually getting much better. Each generation is getting better because largely they are training on better data and more data. And we've seen that like in spades with Llama 2. Trillion tokens, but a smaller model in terms of parameters makes a big difference. So the models are actually getting better. And then the last thing I would say, just from a lot of the people who are going to be watching this are going to be like business users, right?
Yeah.
The general response by an LLM is not that important to you. What's important is in your domain and in your application, does it work well? And some of these general tests that people are doing out of these research labs really don't mimic the way you're going to be using it, even if like there's some truth to it. It's for what we can see is they're just actually getting better.
Right. Yeah, I think so. And I think domain specific is really important. I think about the healthcare space, right? And being able to look at 100 million, patient records, of course, anonymized data, not the actual patient, but the maybe the diagnosis and what happened, and being able to look at 100 million records and be able to say, okay, based on these, inputs, what do you think it is, Mr. LLM, and being able to get answers to help guide and help support. Of course, not.
I just saw a demo today, which I thought was fascinating, and it's like we see this again and again. So this is a security camera, or not a security camera, but it's actually a camera, like an AI camera, like image capture thing, and it could be for security, but a lot of it's just to like track people and their behavior in stores, like to see like and. This is the old thing we used to do with like traffic analysis, like where the hot spots in your store, that's where you put your end caps. So you do your specials and things like that to get them through. And the CTO said, we always create these dashboards so people can see everything. But the problem is we've got 15 different people who are using it in a company and they all want a different dashboard. So like, how do we do that? Right. And how do we optimize it? And he said, it can take months to get something they can all agree to. And so he said, in less than a week, we put GPT 3.5 on it. And now people could just ask questions. And he showed this little demo where they were able to query the data and it just gave them the answer in rank order. And it's a bunch of things that you would never put on a dashboard, but like today I need it. And so this is just like one of those examples of like, I would consider low hanging fruit because it's so good at understanding the language input and intent. And then it has the structured data behind it. Like it opens up new use cases, not just about doing things better that we're already doing today, which in large part was what the voice assistant movement was about, like just another way, a more efficient way to do a lot of things that we can do today. This has some of that, but it's also things we can't do today.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's what really where the future is headed. It's about solving problems in new ways. And what we're seeing is, if we look at the people that are coming from this conference, and, this is going to be about a 1,500 person conference, we'll probably have folks from 20 or 30 countries by the time it's all said and done. And if you look, and when I look at the attendees, they're with a lot of them with major brands and major enterprises. Companies are definitely leaning forward. And we look at some of the
Yes.
companies that are speaking at the conference, General Motors and Estee Lauder and, Verizon and Walmart and the list goes on. I mean, people are really trying to find new ways to solve challenges, to solve things that weren't solvable before. And I think that's the promise of what's happening right now. I also think that there's I am a little bit philosophical about the arrival of sort of this AI moment post pandemic. And the way things are being done, if you kind of look pre and post pandemic, it's completely different. And the things that we did leading into the pandemic actually don't apply and don't work anymore. And we needed new tools and we needed new ideas and new things as we go forward in kind of this new post pandemic area. So there's almost this feeling of like new energy, there's new technology, there's new ways to solve things. And it's kind of a new world in many ways. I don't know what you think about that, but I'm definitely feeling that. And seeing
Yeah,
all these new
absolutely.
people coming into the conference.
Yeah. Well, so first of all, I haven't seen any technology that showed this much broad enterprise interest since mobile for sure.
Right.
And I think it's actually more intense than mobile because that took a longer time to metastasize. Whereas there
Yep.
was a moment between 96 and 98 when every enterprise woke up to the web, for example, saying, "Hey,
Yep.
I think this was really important. That this is compressed like that." Whereas mobile really took about 5 years to develop
Mm-hmm.
in terms of that. And it was, I don't think it's as far reaching either. Just a couple quick things. So we went from, when we went from, or when the web came about, we went from analog to digital for the first time. So we didn't have mental models, we didn't have frameworks, we didn't know what to do. So a lot of it was doing and learning by doing, and seeing what worked. When we went to
Mm-hmm.
mobile, there was some of that, but most of the new stuff came later. It was more about just optimizing for this new interface, this new channel, is like you talked
Mm-hmm.
about, and then we got good ideas later. This is more like the web to me because we're going from a world where humans always had to create things to systems can create things,
Right.
or natural language unstructured data was, we always required a human to do a lot of the work, if not all the work, but
Yeah.
now we can actually leverage that. So this strikes me as really significant, and that's why I'm seeing so many companies uh, who are interested. And if you just look at it, like an IBM study just came out a couple months ago, 3,000 CEOs, they're getting pressured to implement generative AI. By whom?
Yeah.
2/3 of board members, almost 2/3 of investors, and half of their customers are saying, "What are you
Yeah.
doing with generative AI? How are you going to make my experience better?" And this goes
Right.
back to the pandemic. Actually, it comes up with Greg Cross from Soul Machines, CEO there. He made this comment on in one of our videos that we did with him last year. He said, "The bots are coming, and it's just in time." And but
Yeah.
basically because we
Yeah.
created all these problems for us with this clutter of information, this mountain of
Mm.
data, and we got
Yeah.
stuck because the humans were the bottleneck. And now we have these tools that can actually take over some of these things that we required humans for in largely low value activities. And then we get new value out of what we already have.
I think that's a really smart insight. It is. We developed the tools we need because of the amount of data that we've generated over the last 20 years. It became like untenable, right? So it's like we have to invent the new tools in order for us to move forward. Really, it's going to be a fascinating year. I think what's kind of telling is we got sponsors like GitHub and coding
Yes.
generative coding platforms sponsored a conference called Voice and AI. We look at most of the large language models are present at the conference in some way, shape, or form, either speaking directly or that's very topical and will be a topic that's spoken about at the event. I've thought about this conference this year, and we did a slight tweak, right? We went from Voice Summit to Voice and AI. I think it's been a good sort of transition, but I'm going to tease out that we're going to change the name of this conference. We're going to try to become a broader, actually more reflective of the conference that is this year, right? And so
Yes.
it's a conference about LLMs and natural language and generative AI and the applications of those technologies across all these verticals. So just so you know, we are going to be introducing a new name for the conference at the conference. So we're going to hold that, but I wanted to get your reaction to that, and are you feeling the sort of the same thing?
Yeah. We had a long talk, I think it was a year ago, about convergence.
Yep.
And we've been working in all these different silos of technology that you and I know well, and particularly a number of AI technologies that were all in their own lane. And what we're starting to see is these things come together. And that's why I started Synthedia as well. I mean, so like Voicebot, we've been covering generative AI since 2017, more heavily since 2020 with GPT-3. We had
Yep.
BERT in 2018. There were some things, but a year ago we had 150 articles on Voicebot on this. I think we have 800 now, just in terms of coverage of the space. But Synthedia, the whole idea there was this idea of convergence of a lot of these different technologies. And that's why the daily newsletter was a way just to like talk people through this idea of each lane and how the lanes work together in AI. And I think your observation is really interesting. You put on a conference and you're like, oh, wait a second, this convergence idea, all these different pieces coming together. We are in a new era. It's a new platform that we're thinking about. We're all going to be building differently. How do you properly reflect that in a conference? And you're doing that this year with the people who are coming. And it sounds like maybe next year, the naming will even reinforce that more.
That's right. And that's what we wanted. We really want this to be, to evolve into the conference that people are making it this year. It's really reflective of that. And so when we look at, who's involved and what they're trying to accomplish, well, it's going to reflect that. So I'm excited about it. Bret, it's been great to catch up. We are going to be seeing you September 6th at 9 a.m. on the main stage to kick us off. And really, I think, give everybody sort of a reflection of everything that you've been following. And you've just done such a great job. You publish every day. Your team does a really good job. You're really one of the, I think, leading newsletters and leading organizations on this space. So we're really, really excited to have you. I'm excited to see you as a friend. Any final thoughts before we sign off and then join up in just over a week in Washington, D.C.?
I really just hope to see a lot of people out. I'm looking forward to catching up with folks. I just had a mutual friend of ours just stop through town here. We had dinner the other night. We were sort of talking about how things have changed over the last several years, and I'm there to learn. So if you've got something to teach me, set up some time, reach out to me. We'll make the time to get together. And I mean, this is why we get together. This is why what you're doing in terms of these physical events is so important, because these are great. I love this when we talk here, but it'll be great when there's 5 or 6 people and we're all just, over dinner or in the hallway talking about all these ideas together.
Yeah, there's just, I mean, it is so important for us to get together. We've isolated as people. We had to for a little while, but, and then I think that became a practice for a lot of folks. But, there are a lot of people talk about return to office. I think it's time to return to the conference and get together. So excited to see you there.
Well, I will be there.
Yes, I know. Yeah, I know you will be. So we appreciate it, Bret. Been great chatting with you, and see you soon.
Thanks, Pete.
All right, that's been a great chat with Bret Kinsella. He has been following the space so closely. You're going to be able to hear from Bret at Voice and AI, Voice.ai. The conference is September 5th through 7th in Washington, D.C. If you don't have your ticket yet and you are at all thinking about the space of large language models, generative AI, natural language, conversational AI, et cetera, this is the conference. We're going to have people from around the world. The leading voices on the space, talks from OpenAI, from Google, from Amazon, NVIDIA, you name it. It's going to be covered, including our friend Bret Kinsella from Voicebot. So hope to see you there. It's been great having you with us today. Cheers.